Hello, can everyone hear me? This is just related to look at item within. Can people hear me? Can you let me know in the chat? Okay, I guess I'll go ahead and start. So this session is for anyone who has access to some sort of company's real data and they want to start doing projects, transition to data engineering. The focus is specifically going to be on deciding what to build and how to build it as quick as possible, because that can create trust, which is kind of the initial thing and the main thing you need to be able to interview with these companies. So let's get started. And by the end of this session, you will have ideas for a couple of projects that you can implement today at your work, or Monday if you want to wait for the week to start. So let's get started. So the first thing that people hire for is not really kind of the tools or frameworks, but people hire for trust and likability. So what that means is when you are in an interview, when you're talking to the interviewer, you need to build trust, and you do this by choosing the right design patterns, by answering their questions, by understanding their problem. But even before that, they need to trust that you'll be able to deliver value to the company. So what does value mean? Oh, it's a break for you. Let me check the audio. How about now? Is it still breaking? Is it better now, Sherwin? Let me check something up with the microphone. Sorry about that. How about now? Can you hear me? Is that better? Okay. How about now? Is this better? How about now? Is this better? Yeah, sorry about that. Let's continue. Yeah, so as I was saying, people. People hire for trust and likability, and you build that trust by showcasing your skills, by showing a potential employer what you've done at work. So when people start learning, they want to break into data engineering. What they do is they spend months trying to learn everything, learn all the tools, learn all the platform, understand every nuance of a tool. However, the main thing you have to do is concentrate on delivering value and showcase that on your resume with star points. So in order of priority, these are the three main things. So trust and likability is what most employees look for, even though they don't say it out, even though it's not in the job description. What they want is someone who will make their lives easy. They don't want someone, who knows all the technical concepts but is not helpful to the team. So trust you can build. Likability, it depends on how you interview and how you click with the interviewer. Fundamentals and design, we will see in the next section, but because basically that's just a way to prevent errors. And then tools and frameworks, if you know one and if you know the fundamentals, you can quickly kind of read up on the rest and use that during your interview. But there is nothing you can do about certain types of companies that look for very specific tools, and they'll say like, oh, you need to have like 5 years of experience in Databricks. If they are looking for that level of experience and they are very specific, there's pretty much nothing you can do if you're not using that specific tools. However, for most companies, they're okay as long as you know how to use these tools. Okay, so let's keep going. So that's where we go, like trust and likability. The main idea here is going to be how, in this section, is going to be how we are going to build trust. So the first step is, I'm assuming you all have some sort of data you work with. So the first step is going to be understanding what you already have. Don't think about like creating something new. Don't think about really fancy use cases, but think about what you already do. The tables that you kind of, let's say, create reports from, or look at in the morning, or use to answer stakeholder questions, and concentrate on those tables. So I want to pause for 10 minutes where we go over these kind of parts of an exercise which will help you come up with these sort of data sets that you currently use. So the first one would be identifying the data sets that you currently use. It has to be something that you own. So what that means is, by own, I mean people ask you questions about it. And then it also has to be used by a sufficient number of people. 3 would be ideal, but if you're in a smaller company, 1 is fine as well. And then without this data, the end user needs to be blocked. They don't have any other option but to use this data. So I want you to take like 2 to 3 minutes to write 3 data sets that you use right now that satisfy these 3 conditions of part 1. And in the meantime, if anyone has questions, please let me know in the chat. Okay, so that should be good. Can someone tell me, show me a data set that they figured out that they own, that at least 3 people use, and is kind of critical for the end user? I'm curious to see what you came up with. Any answers here? Be good to go over some examples. Okay, I guess none. So let's. Okay, Shantik has some data here. Ticket system data, technology enablement data, IT and security team for first one. Yeah, there you go. So you already have an outcome. You just need to automate it a little bit. That way, you can add that as a resume star point. So, for example, ticket system data, I'm assuming in some sort of like system where end users create tickets, it's resolved by engineers or sales staff. So you can use that to create a report or whatever whoever your end user is, or even just like create a table that gets that data to the end user. You don't need to do anything fancy, just automate a little bit of it. It doesn't even have to be a table. You can just create a view as well. That is in of itself helpful for the end user because they don't have to rerun the queries. So that's a great example. So you have a data set. It is being used by multiple people. Now the next step would be to imagine this as a star point. So what I mean by star is situation, task, action, result. So this is like the typical format you want to be writing your resume key points in. So it'll be like, oh, the situation was, for example, in ticket system data, people wanted this information and they didn't have access to it. I created a data product that gives them access to this ticket data that they can kind of self-serve themselves. And the result was, time to decision making or whatever, however the people using it actually use. So they're not blocked on you. You're automating that. That is the data product. Does that make sense? I'll wait here for any questions for a few minutes. Okay. So once you have that, once you have some sort of idea of what you're going to build, and you have the star points defined, now it's actually time to kind of build that. And we go backwards from the star points, then the project, because the whole idea here is for you to showcase your skills. So you need to make sure there is an outcome for you, which is the star point is kind of really good, looks really good on your resume, and that is what we are going for. Any questions up until now? Okay. So we can come back to the feedback form later. So let's go over the implementation. Your first implementation should ideally just be SQL query. If possible, make it a view. That way you don't have to maintain it, but you still deliver value. But if your data is too large, or if you have to create it as a pipeline, then create it as a table. Don't go for projects that take longer time to implement. Don't go for projects that you are dependent on other teams to implement. Go with projects that you can do by yourself, and it's simple enough that you can do it in maybe a few days, even under a week. So this is one of my favorite patterns. Like almost all data summary tables, so any report type of tables, it almost always falls under this pattern where you have like a fact data and some dimensions, and then you join them and then you group them. I mean, this looks pretty simple here, but in real life it might be like hundreds of rows, hundreds of columns. So that use that pattern, create a view if possible for your report. So that should be kind of your first step. If you have to create it as a table, and that's a big if, then you can think about scheduling it with like Airflow or dbt cloud or whatever your company uses. And if your company doesn't use a scheduler, then you can use like crontab or task scheduler on your local machine, so it doesn't even have to run on any infrastructure. So the idea here again is to reduce dependencies, get something out to the end user. Any questions so far? I'll pause for a minute. Most resumes don't. Oh, by star model I mean in your resume under your experience, you have to write a point for each project, and those points should follow the star model. Most resumes don't follow the star model. You'd be surprised at how many people don't use the star model. They'll say things like, "Oh, I created a data set." They wouldn't say what, and they wouldn't say, most importantly, you want to say what the outcome of that is. So if you create this table or create this view, how does it benefit the end users? Is it increasing their self-serve capabilities? Meaning you can say things like a reduced wait time by n% or something like that. The idea with star is you almost always want to showcase your the action you took, which is the A, and then the result of that action, which is the outcome for the end user. That is very important, and it ideally has to be numerical. So X% increase or X% decrease, something of that sort. So you almost that's the story model you want to say. This is the situation we are in. This is the task I decided to do. This is how I did it with action, and this was the result. Make it sound impactful. Even if you don't think it is, it actually is in most cases. Does that help, Sharwin? Okay, great. So the next part, we're almost there. The next part is internal transfers. So if you are in a large enough company, the most easiest way to get into data engineering is to do an internal transfer, and this is because data teams and most teams in general, they want to reduce the risk of hiring a bad hire. However, if you have delivered outcomes following the above two sections, it will be a pretty easy decision because they can trust you. They know you can do it. It's difficult if your tech stacks are wildly different. For example, if you're working in SQL and they do something like Scala, it's going to be hard. However, most data teams, analytics, and data engineers use the same thing, especially in larger companies. So if you can show that you have thought about end users, you have delivered value, most internal data engineering teams are happy to take you on. So that is like the simplest way or the easiest way to get into data engineering. And that's why you almost always find internal transfers and referrals work way better than applying online, where you have to go through a resume, screening, and all that sort of things. Yeah. And when you are going to reach out, make sure to reach out to a senior data engineer or staff in that team and show them that you have done XYZ. If you have slides, which you probably should for the outcomes you created, show them the slides, tell them that you're interested in the type of work they do some research on the type of work they do, connect the type of work they do to the type of outcomes you have driven for your stakeholders, and make that a point and thank them and tell them like, hey, if there is something coming up, please let me know, and ask them for pointers if there's anything you can do to help out their team. And 99% of the time this works. So I want you guys to take like 5 minutes to draft a quick message to your data engineering team, and I'll answer questions in the meantime. Sharvan asks, access to table versus views to end user, when, why? So that's a good question. So you typically want to use views if your data is small enough. So what that means is if you're working with like 10 GB of data and you're creating a report on that, you can use views. That way end users can just use the views, and you're not having to maintain this pipeline It's just view you just created once, that's it. However, if your table is, or if your data is very large, what happens is when you use views over and over again, the cost may go up. But that's a very, if you're working in a really large data environment, if the cost goes up, then it's going to be a problem. It might not be, depending on your situation with your company, but if it is, then creating a table might be worth it. There are some cases where you create a table and a view on top, just so that end users are always using that view, and you can change the table, but the view doesn't change. That way, it's kind of like an interface between the tables and end users. That way, even if you change the table structure, table column names, the view still kind of provides what end users are always used to. Does that answer your question, Sharwin? Okay. Yeah, partly how based on it. End user types. You mean the personas like analysts, scientists, data and backend engineers? I'm assuming that's what you're asking about. Honestly, it shouldn't matter what their persona is, because view access is the same as table access. The main issue would be cost, with the concern of cost, because that would view means you're kind of rerunning the same query each time. Analysts who do analytics on a warehouse, yeah, they can still use views or tables. It shouldn't matter, because let's say you have a warehouse and you create fact and dimensions as views, because your data set, input data set is only 4 GB. It shouldn't matter to the analyst if they are using views or tables. To them, all that matters is they have the facts and dimensions as they want. So does that make sense? Okay. All right. So if someone drafted a message, I would like to see that in the chat. I don't think there are a lot of people, but if someone's interested in sharing, I'd be curious to see how you're reaching out to your data team or data engineering team. Okay. So coming to fundamentals and design, they matter a lot when you're interviewing, especially if you're interviewing with a new company. You're not doing an internal transfer. The the main idea behind design is to create easy to use, correct in-time data. So that'll be like, you need to make sure your data model is right. You need to make sure your data is partitioned properly, and you also need to do like make sure data quality is there, and make sure backfilling is doable, and also like decide on how frequently it needs to run. So that I don't want to cover in this session, because that's going to be quite a bit. For fundamentals, I have a D101 course, so you can check that out. And yeah, that's about it. This is more about like a way to kind of identify projects and do them immediately, and kind of get you to start building that trust. Once you have that, a couple of projects, then you can concentrate on figuring out the fundamentals and design, and then the tools that different companies uses. So what this will give you is the whole picture. You are doing data engineering already, so that will make it easy for interviewing, especially with the system design and behavioral type questions. Any questions so far? there are no questions, that's about it. I would love to get some feedback. Please click on the link in the chat and let me know what you think. And if there is interest in the second part, please let me know as well. I'll stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions related to anything data. Happy to answer. I'll stay for like 10-20 minutes if you need. Okay. Do you guys have any ideas of what you're gonna build? Okay, that's a question. Based on your work experience, can you tell when have you given direct access to final tables versus views? I'm not sure I understand your question, Sharvan. What do you mean by final table? Like, do you mean like just tables we build for our users? Or is there something to that word final? Ah, I see what you mean. Yeah, so when I create tables in curated layer, which are like certified, data quality checked, I only give access to end users, mostly to just the mart layer, because for them sometimes it's harder to use the facts and dimension, especially for like business type stakeholders and analysts. They're more comfortable with using the marts. It's very rare that they get access to the facts and dimensions. So yeah, it's typically their permission is limited to the goal layer. That also decreases the amount of responsibility on the data team, so that you make sure that the mart tables are good enough so that they are not like making some mistakes and asking you to debug with the silver tables. Now with the mart layer, it can be tables or views. It doesn't matter, because what matters is what data they have access to. In the mart layer, you may create a table that uses facts and dimension, does some aggregates, and you have a pipeline running. Or in the mart layer, it might just be a view, but that does the same thing. So irrespective of view or table, most people access is restricted to the kind of final mart layer. Does that answer your question, Sherman? So there's another question. Do you put your data warehouse facts and dimensions in the silver layer? Yes, most of the time. Because there are companies who do differently. They have like 3 layers. The data assets do some cleaning, facts and dimension as the goal layer. But in every company I've worked with, what I've always done is the raw data as is with a little bit of data type cleaning. But this data is immutable, meaning you're not going to be deleting it. That's like the bronze. And then silver, I model it as facts and dimensions. Gold or moths will be summary tables that people can directly just access. I've found it to work very well for both large and small companies, especially with like or like columnar store. It's pretty easy and it's not that expensive. Instead of having like end user having to recreate metrics, I create the metrics for them in the goal layer or the moth layer. The idea there is to keep the number of hops between draw and final data for end users short, that as minimal as possible. That way there's less maintenance, and then just it's easy to debug as well. Does that help answer your question, Shravan? Right. That's great. If there's no other questions, I think we can end here. There's not a lot of people right now, so I'll wait for a minute to see if there are any questions. If none, we can end here. So there is a question. Direct access to data warehouse tables is probably given for any self-service. Yeah. So typically what happens is you create these summary tables. BI tools can access them. Some teams can access them, like data science team, data analytics team. So they can do whatever they want with the data. They can only read. They cannot write. So that's a important distinction. They cannot update or anything. They can only read. But they do have direct access to the MART tables. Very rarely to the facts and dimensions, only for very advanced users. But that's like maybe like 2 or 3% of the entire set of users get access to facts and dimensions. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you everybody for joining. I'm curious to see what you all build. Let me know if you have any questions. Reach out to me through my website or Twitter or LinkedIn. Thank you all for taking the time on a weekend. Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye. Best way to reach, probably LinkedIn or joseph.machado@startdataengineering.com. So that's my email, so you can email me as well. Yep. Thanks everyone.